Chapter 28 As Dominoes Fall. Saint-Domingue, 1790. Marie Sosette moved gracefully through the dining room, her steps silent against the polished wooden floor. The aroma of garlic and onion wafted through the air, mingling with the scent of roasted meat and freshly baked bread. Candlelight glowed softly, reflecting against the rain-drenched windows and fine china that was arranged with meticulous care on the dining table. Thomas' efforts in France to secure control of his inheritance had proved fruitless. Antoine's young bride, still dazed by widowhood and wealth, remained oblivious to the vast fortune lying in wait on her late husband's colonial estates being quietly plundered by marauding pretenders. The Maubiers now fully ran La Guinaudet as if it were their own. The plantation was dripping in profit under Anna Maubier's vigilant eyes. The woman hid her sharp business acumen behind the twin veils of marital deference and moral superiority. In doing so, the Maubiers unofficially minted themselves as members of the local elite. As with all nobility, real or aspiring, social standing was cemented at dinner parties. Anna, who once dressed in the plain humility of a Quaker, now lived for lavish gatherings, silks, and jewels. She adored entertaining. Among tonight's guests were the Rouvrays, Marie Sosette's least favorite couple, second only to Anna and Hector themselves. 4 years had passed since the Rouvrays traveled north to Cap Français, and to Marie Sosette's dismay, Jean had since forged a twisted friendship with Anna. The vile marquise took perverse delight in watching her old rival reduced to servitude. Jean's husband, Antoine Adrien Lamotte, Marquis de Rouvray, was heavily involved in both politics and the shipping industry, and had no qualms about profiting from his wife's vendetta. However, the Rouvrays were not the only guests this evening. Henri and Élise Duclos had become friends of the Maubiers over the past couple years, and had dined at the plantation on several occasions. Marie Sosette found the husband utterly despicable, though his wife seemed tolerable. Also present was Monsieur Lefebvre, an elderly widower with little to say, and Baron de Libertad the Comte de Breda, a relatively new face among the local gentry. His wife had received the invitation, but she had apparently fallen ill and sent her husband in her stead. But the guest of honor tonight was the newly appointed Governor Durand and his wife, who had only recently arrived from France. As Marie Sosette poured wine for the guests, she listened intently to the conversations swirling around her. The room buzzed with politics, gossip, and self-congratulation. Anna moved about them all, draped in the opulent fabrics of newfound wealth. Anna had always craved recognition from the French elite. Despite years of effort, the Maubiers were still generally seen as Spanish outsiders. Yet Anna believed, fervently, that these dinners were her gateway to the elusive cabal of true French nobility. "Anna, you look positively radiant," remarked Élise Duclos. "Those pearls suit you perfectly." "Thank you, Élise. They were gifts from Hector. He has been so generous lately." Élise turned to the governor's wife. "How are you liking Saint-Domingue?" "It is beautiful. We were told the weather would be lovely, but the descriptions did not do proper justice," she replied pleasantly. "It is nice to get out of France, that is certain," Governor Durand interjected. "I was beginning to worry for my wife's safety there. The land has descended into madness." "It is very disconcerting," Élise agreed. "My family still lives there. They have written to us about the chaos. I was shocked to hear that the king agreed to limit the monarchy. To restrict divine power? It feels unthinkable." "It's disgusting, that is what it is," Durand retorted angrily. Henri Duclos leaned over and placed a hand on his wife's. "Darling, leave the politics to the men to discuss." "Of course, my love. How forward of me." As my wife was saying, her family wrote us recently about the mutiny in Nancy. Have you heard about it? Of course, Durand replied. Forgive me, what mutiny? Monsieur Lefebvre asked. It's disgraceful. Treason in His Majesty's army, the Marquis de Rouvray spat. The governor cleared his throat. I'm not sure if you are aware, but the king has frequently employed Swiss mercenaries in his service. As you can imagine, their loyalties are stronger to their coin than to our king. So, in conjunction with some of the rebel-rousing bourgeoisie soldiers in the lower ranks, there was a mutiny in the town of Nancy. They rose up against their commander, Madame Durand said excitedly. Disgraceful, Hector growled. As a former soldier, I find such treachery intolerable. Mutineers deserve no quarter. I hope they were dealt with swiftly and without mercy. Thankfully, yes, Durand said with evident pride. His Majesty dealt with their insolence swiftly. 30 years chained to the oars, every one of them. A fitting punishment, Madame de Rouvray said, her voice as cold as polished glass. Slavery is the natural state for the lowest among us. It runs in their blood, though they're far too dull to understand it. Her eyes were fixed on Marie Sosette as she idly twirled a silver fork between her fingers. The conversation swelled around them, but Jean didn't blink. She and Marie Sosette remained locked in a silent, venomous standoff. The governor's wife leaned over towards Elise and whispered, It was a woman who actually helped secure the king's victory. She watered the cannons so the mutineers could not attack the king's army and come to put down the traitorous Swiss. Madame de Rouvray raised a single eyebrow, the corner of her mouth curling into a slow, vicious grin. She gave the fork one final twirl between her fingers before deliberately letting it slip. The silver clattered against the polished floor. "Oh, slave girl, fetch me another fork," she said snidely. Marie Sosette inhaled sharply and stiffly walked forward to retrieve the fork. But before she could bend down, an unexpected voice came to her defense. "Madame," the Comte de Breda said evenly, "I don't know what is happening here, but what is exceedingly clear is that you are not as clumsy as you pretend." There was an edge to his voice that made Marie Sosette pause. The sharpness of his tone startled her. It was clear his grievance with Madame de Rouvray went deeper than this moment, though she had no context from which to draw any certainty. The Marquis de Rouvray stood up and leaned across the table. "You dare speak to my wife like that, Monsieur le Comte?" "Adrienne, you are perfectly aware that she intentionally dropped that." "As was her right," Rouvray seethed. "These slaves need to understand who their masters are." "Like that bastard Auger," Henri Duclos chimed in, siding with the Marquis. "Auger is a free man," Breda said hotly. Marie Sosette watched with intrigue as battle lines calcified within the dining room. "Only because we allow him to be free," Duclos retorted angrily. "At the rate he's going, Auger is unlikely to retain his liberty much longer. I have a spare pair of irons, Governor, should you find yourself in need." Anna turned to Governor Durand. "You aren't going to actually allow his people to vote, are you?" "It's the law now, Anna," Breda said angrily. "Slow down, everyone," Governor Durand said. "It is the law of an illegal assembly of French commoners. They have no dominion here," Henri Duclos sneered. "Well, technically," Elise began. "Louis XVI was anointed by God," Madame de Rouvray insisted. "What is happening abroad, curtailing his power, the false assembly, it is an abomination. We must stand against it." Marie Sosette grabbed a clean piece of silver and silently slipped it beside Madame de Rouvray, hoping the Marquise was sufficiently engaged in her conversation. But Jean never missed an opportunity to slather insults upon her nemesis. "This is filthy," she jeered. Anna gasped. "I'm terribly sorry, Jean." She turned angrily towards Marie Cosette. "Louise, stop acting like a featherbrain and bring the Marquise a decent piece of sterling." "There was nothing wrong with the fork, madame." Marie Cosette kept her eyes down, but her voice was tight. "You dare speak to me?" Anna stood up and quickly marched over to Marie Cosette. Without a moment's hesitation, she slapped Marie Cosette across the face. A voice across the table let out a gasp, but Marie Cosette did not look up to see who it was. At the sting of Anna's hand, Marie Cosette lost her footing, but only slightly. Then she promptly straightened back without flinching. "Exactly my point," Duclos interrupted. "These animals walk around thinking they are our equals. They won't stop there. Auger is trying to mobilize." "Ladies, gentlemen, calm yourselves," the governor interjected eagerly. "Rest assured, such radical notions will not find fertile ground under my watch. Our society is built on order and tradition, not on the whims of a few agitators." Marie Cosette turned on her heel and entered the kitchen to fetch the next course. She rubbed her stinging cheek as soon as she closed the door behind her. Nui was standing over the stove, stirring the sauce for dinner. Marie Cosette strode over to the pan and spat in it contemptuously. "I take it dinner is going well," Nui chuckled, stirring in Marie Cosette's saliva. "I hate that woman. I actually hate her." "I thought I heard a slap. Are you all right? Was it Madame de Rouvray?" "No, that was Anna. She didn't really have a choice. I spoke back." Nui gave her a stern look and let out an exasperated sigh. "Stop talking like a white woman." "Why did God move her here? Just to haunt me for my sins?" Marie Cosette paced around the kitchen. "First, I don't know what sins you could possibly be referring to, and before you answer, Adi was not your fault, so get that out of your head immediately. Second, it wasn't God, just capitalism that moved the Rouvrays north." Marie Cosette inhaled sharply. "You know, if Antoine hadn't sold me, if I had just accepted his inheritance without an argument, I would have equaled her rank. I am, technically, the widow, of a marquis. I'd have been powerful, just like her." Nui gently placed a hand on Marie Cosette's back. "Honey, you never needed a title to be powerful. You have always been a force of nature." "Have I? I don't feel any of that spark anymore," Marie Cosette mumbled. "Marie Cosette used to be powerful, educated, and distinctly different from Louise. Now, Marie Cosette is just as pathetic as Louise was." "Louise was never pathetic. But you are not her anymore. You aren't. You are strong because you endure in conditions where others would break." "I did break. I'm weak, scared. I hate everything about myself, but I'm too afraid to do anything about it." Marie Cosette leaned against the table. "I miss the woman I was before." "I miss seeing you happy," Nui said. "But if you believe you are weak, you are fooling yourself." "Nui." "No, Marie Cosette, hear me. You are strong and you are patient. It takes much more strength to survive the life you are living now, and you are doing it selflessly." "I just spit in their dinner." "Damn right you did." Nui leaned over to the pot and added her own to the mix. "You are so bad," Marie Cosette almost smirked. "Seasoning," Nui grinned. "I was so naive. I genuinely believed that I had succeeded in life and that I had control of myself, my children, and even my husband." She chuckled in spite of herself and shook her head. Nui grabbed her hand and squeezed it tightly. "I don't want to go back out there," Marie Cosette whispered. I know, honey. I'm sorry. I have to get Jean a third piece of sterling just because she wants to watch me grovel. You aren't groveling. You are biding your time. You are like the heron waiting for its prey. You stand perfectly still in the water so the foolish little fish swims right up to you. And then, when the moment is right, you bend your elegant neck and swallow her whole. Marie Sosette turned away from her. Some days, I can forget my life from Jeremy. I can live in the moment here. Not because I want to, but because that is what I see. But every time I see her, I am assailed by the memories of what I have lost. Who I have lost. I understand. You know I do. I have lost my children, Marie Sosette said ruefully, burying her head in her hands. I have nothing left but the bitterest of recollections. 2 large tears rolled down her cheeks. You are young, Nui answered. Your bitter recollections have the time requisite to change into the happiest of memories. Is that how you manage it? I know your family was sold out from under you before Antoine purchased you. I have learned that it is best to carry your sorrows inside you, as the cloud conceals ruin and death, like a deadly secret that is understood only when the storm breaks. Marie Sosette looked at her. When the heron snaps its beak? When the heron snaps its beak, Nui repeated. Thank you, Marie Sosette said. You are the only reason I don't feel completely isolated here. Of course. Now go get them ready for dinner. I worked hard on this. I want to make sure they enjoy it properly. They are talking about Auger. It's exasperating. I'll bet he has them all wound up, Nui snickered. That would be an understatement. Do you think he can really bring the change he is promising? Nui looked at her friend. If not him, someone will do it. Maybe not today or even tomorrow, but someday? Yes. Saint-Domingue won't abide by this forever. You heard what has happened in France. Marie Sosette cracked the smallest smile. From your lips to God's ears. She returned to the dining room, placing a third fork in front of Madame de Rouvray, but this time Jean barely noticed. The discussion around the table had grown incredibly heated.
The Count Preda appeared on the verge of abandoning dinner altogether. You are being unduly sensitive, Béron, Duclos growled in a paltry tone. Monsieur le Comte, won't you please just calm down for supper? Anna begged. The dinner with the governor was unraveling rapidly. I've rather lost my appetite, Preda said with a courteous and polite tone, but his eyes were flashing with rage. Then he politely bowed and left the room. Marie Sosette raced after him to ensure that he had his hat and umbrella. The rain had been pounding the island for the better part of the week. She quickly grabbed it and met him near the front door. He was in such a huff, she almost expected him to leave without even bothering to retrieve his belongings, slamming the door behind him. If the rain hadn't been so relentless when he opened the door, he probably would have. But the weather gave him just enough pause to allow Marie Sosette to present him with his umbrella. I'm very sorry that happened to you, he said directly to Marie Sosette. She jumped slightly. It is nothing, monsieur. No, it is not right to treat slaves with such indecency. Even the least of us are all God's creatures. Monsieur, I beg your pardon, but I am no slave. I am only kept as such, against my will and against the law. She looked him in the eye. The wrongs you witnessed today do not even begin to account for the crimes that have been levied against me by the people in that room. The Count looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Interesting, he muttered. Well, I would not be aggrieved if a reason presented itself that would allow me to haul any one of them in front of Parliament. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. This is my calling card. Find someone who can read it for you, and it will give you a means to contact me. He winked. I have heard that people in your position are often the first to know what crimes are being hidden by the Grand Blanc. If you find any evidence, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say."
"I can read it myself, sir," Marie said, unblinking.
Huh.
He grinned slightly. "Well then, Madame Dumas." She straightened herself up and adjusted her apron. "Madame Dumas, call on me when you have something. It was my pleasure to meet you, though I regret the circumstances that led to our acquaintance." He bowed to her. Marie breath caught in her throat, but she responded with courtly manners, dipping into a low curtsy. Then he put on his hat, tipped it politely in her direction, and walked out the door. Marie couldn't believe what just happened. She wasn't entirely sure what any of that exchange was, but it was something, and that mattered. It had to matter. She sat down on a small chair in the entrance, staring at his calling card. She flipped it over in her hands several times, examining the calligraphy. A burst of laughter in the dining room, however, reminded her that whatever this interaction was, it did nothing to change her circumstances in the present. She stood up and tucked the card in her apron pocket. Then she returned to the dining room. The temperature had cooled since Breda's departure.
"What a pathetic little man,"
Madame de Rouvray was saying snidely. Marie quietly began setting the china plates for dinner. They gossiped about the Comte for several minutes, mocking his soft-handedness and liberalism. But the man seemed to have enough accolades that the fuel for that conversation didn't last them particularly long. Eventually, their words rolled back to politics, but without the tempering voice of Béon de Libertas, there was nothing to censor their prejudice.
"They actually believe they have a right to citizenship now," Monsieur Lefebvre said, aghast. "We have to put an end to this sort of radicalization," Madame de Rouvray retorted. "First, they want citizenship for the free ones. Then what next? The slaves? The natives?" "I agree, dearest," the Marquis said. "Governor, this is a critical issue, and one that is very necessary to deal with in the local assembly. That is why I seek your support for my installation in this election. I understand the intricacies of this island, how to deal with the blacks and mulattoes. You have to keep them small, even when their numbers are big. Granting citizenship would cause a situation on the island like Dominoes," Rouvray said.
"What are Dominoes?" the governor's wife asked curiously.
"Oh, it's a charming game," Madame de Rouvray said. She turned to Anna. "I don't suppose you have a set."
"I do."
"Perhaps we could enjoy a game while the gentlemen indulge in their cigars," Anna mused. "It is quite thrilling. We received a set from an old Italian friend years ago." "Yes, but what is it?" Madame Durand asked again. "Essentially, there are little tiles, and you knock one over, and then it topples another, and the next, until a whole squadron of little blocks fall in patterns of your choosing," Madame de Rouvray said. Her husband, who had no patience for feminine repartees, continued. "Governor, what I mean is that if we grant undue privileges to the blacks in one area of society, they will demand them in other places as well. This could end our economy. It could dismantle slavery. The implications would devastate Saint-Domingue. You must terminate this nonsense. We cannot survive if these radical Republican ideas gain traction on our island. And I can help you. Do not fear, my friends. So long as I am governor, your concerns are heard," Durand assured them. "I fear you are oversimplifying, dear husband," Jean continued. "Radicals like Auger are not confined to the blacks. There are those among our own kind, like Saint-Onox or Brissot, who haven't an ounce of remorse for the damages that their fanatical ideas are causing." Adrien murmured in agreement. "I will inform the assembly of your concerns, my friends. This colony understands the value of the coin and the validity of conventionality, Durand replied. Anna turned to the governor. Sir, if you want a supreme example of how to effectively maintain the status quo, look no further than Monsieur Duclos. He is a truly upstanding citizen and all-around godly man. His plantation runs with extraordinary efficiency. I was so impressed when I went over for tea last week. Thank you again, Elise, for your wonderful hospitality. Oh, you flatter us, Madame Duclos replied. Don't be modest, Anna continued. His slaves never question him. They are orderly, hard-working, and most importantly, they know their place. If you have a moment, Governor, you should visit them. I do love tea, the governor's wife said quietly. My husband has been so busy recently. I fear to admit this island has felt a little lonely at times. You and your husband are welcome any time, Elise said warmly. Yes, my poor wife. It felt like from the moment we arrived, I have been dousing one fire after another in the governor's office. All the chaos from France, and now Auger. Governor, Hector said coolly, chaos in France is not without its uses. For those who know how to navigate such tides, it could create an unexpected advantage. How do you mean? The governor asked. There is much to be gained from lack of oversight. You strike me as a man who is eager to assert authority when opportunities arise. That is how this island thrives. We live between the laws and conventions, and at times in spite of them. That is the benefit of being a colony. There is more to island life than sunshine. There is profit for those brave enough to seize it. There were murmurs of agreement around the table. The governor eyed the crowd and let out a slow but menacing grin. Anna leaned in and almost whispered, Governor, you appear as someone of like mind, unbothered by sentimentalists. Am I correct that making this island profitable is your chief concern at this time? The governor raised his glass. I did not get this high in politics by fear of treading on insects that are just as easily squashed under my boot. Santé, Hector said, lifting his own glass to lead the toast. A votre succès, the governor responded. His words echoed through the room as goblets clinked. The governor leaned forward, a disturbing glint in his eye. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. Hector rose with theatrical flair and strolled toward him. Tell me, monsieur, when you were a strapping lad, still under your mother's watchful eye, did you ever misbehave when she wasn't looking? The governor chuckled. Some of my fondest memories. As were mine, sir, Hector grinned. Now, picture France as that distracted matron, preoccupied, flailing in her own troubles. And here we are, her children, free to explore certain liberties. We could make some very fond memories indeed, Anna purred, her voice nearing seduction. The conversation turned Marie Sossette's stomach, but then Hector said something that made her freeze mid-step. Monsieur, this island is thick with opportunities, hiding in the blind spots of a distracted crown. Even this very estate stands as proof. La Guinaudet and most of its slaves are not even legally our own. I was appointed as manager years ago, and then, well, the man who employed us died. No one bothered to claim the land or the slaves on it. Even this mouthy one's ownership is suspect. He gestured toward Marie Sosette. Actually, you may find this impossible to believe, but this plantation may truly be owned by this slave's eldest son. Either that or a blonde little Jezebel who couldn't identify Saint-Domingue on a map.
Hector slapped Marie Sosette across the backside and let out a lecherous laugh. The truth is, Anna said smoothly, no one has much interest in paperwork. And certainly no one wishes to see this estate fall into the hands of someone incapable of giving it the love and care my husband and I have shown. The governor nodded, amused. Fortunate, then, that fate has smiled on you both. It only confirmed what we've always known, Elise added, turning affectionately toward Anna. You belong among us. You are a dear friend, Anna beamed. Marie Sosette backed into the shadowed corner of the room, her face stony. The laughter and scheming wrapped around her, but she caught every word, committing each careless confession to memory. Her fingers slipped into her apron pocket, brushing against the calling card she had carefully stowed away. The coming battle was sure to be an uphill one, but she now had an ally, potentially an attorney, who held the same loathing for the Maubiers that burned within her. Perhaps no one knew if Thomas or Antoine's widow owned the plantation. But one fact had become undeniable. Even the Maubiers knew the truth. Legally, none of this belonged to them.